Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All right, we're going to be picking up here with the second part of our our cellular energy lesson, going over ATP and how we get it from both photosynthesis and cellular respiration. So to start us off today, we will be finishing up with photosynthesis and then we will be getting into cellular respiration. So this picture you have here in front of you is excuse me, is a diagram showing you the two different um, reactions within photosynthesis. You have your light reactions and you have your light dependent reactions, and then your light independent reaction, also known as the Calvin cycle. So, light dependent reaction, it depends on light. Light independent reaction, it does not have to have light to be completed. Second one is also known as the Calvin cycle. These two chemical reactions work together. So, starting off with the light-dependent reaction. This takes place within the thylakoid membranes. Again, it requires light. Requirements for the light-dependent reaction. We need water, ADP, and NADP+. This plus means that this phosphate head is going to be positive. What is produced from your light-dependent reaction? Oxygen, ATP, and NADPH. So the process of photosynthesis requires carrier molecules. An electron carrier molecule can accept a pair of high energy electrons and transfer them with most of their energy. NADP, NAD, FAD are all carrier molecules. So the electron carriers within the light-dependent reaction. Inside the thylakoid, electrons within the chlorophyll become excited, or they gain energy, from sunlight. Now that they have all this energy, they require a carrier molecule to move them throughout the rest of the chemical process. One of these is NADP+. NADP+, as soon as this carrier molecule, NADP+, accepts the energy from the electrons, it converts the NADP+ into NADPH. What happens is once it gets that electron, this P is then, what's the word? Sorry. This P looks for and is attracted to a floating hydrogen atom. So that's what this H is. Hydrogen atom. It comes in and that's where it finalizes its stability. That way it can continue to get moved on and where we really get the energy from. This transfer of electrons and energy is called the electron transport chain. So think of it as popcorn. As soon as you heat up popcorn in you guys might be too young to heat up popcorn on the stove. Anyhow, when popcorn inside of your stove gets really hot, so put it this way, you pour the popcorn into your pot. It starts to get hot, starts to get some energy. The hotter it gets, the more energy is within the popcorn, and then as popcorn in its name, it pops, it bounces around. So the hotter that the corn gets, when it finally pops open, because it just can't take any more energy inside, it has to release it. It'll pop out of the pan, unless you have it covered. And then you get the fluffy white part of the popcorn. Sorry, I'm getting off topic. All right, so moving on to light-dependent reaction. Not moving on, sorry, we're still in light-dependent reactions. Sunlight breaks each water molecule into three different parts. Your electrons, which is going to be the hydrogen part, hydrogen ions released into the thylakoid membrane, and then also oxygen atoms released back into the air. As electrons are passed from chlorophyll to NADP+, more hydrogen ions are pumped across the membrane. Inside of the membrane fills up with positively charged hydrogen ions. Outside of the thylakoid membrane becomes negatively charged. So inside is positive, outside is negative. Difference in charges across the membrane provide the energy to make ATP. The hydrogen ions are important. ATP synthase is a large protein, or actually it's an enzyme, that's a large protein that uses energy from the hydrogen ions to bind ADP and a phosphate group together to produce ATP. ATP synthase spans the thylakoid membrane and allows hydrogen ions to pass through it. So overall, you produce oxygen gas and convert ADP and NADP plus into the energy carriers ATP and NADPH. So looking at this here, inside is the thylakoid space, a high hydrogen ion concentration on the inside, making this inside positively charged, and then the outside is going to be negatively charged. This complex here is actually your ATP synthase. And so is this one. Sorry, this one is ATP synthase. They don't name this one, but just looking at it where the NADPH is getting produced, this here is also an ATP synthase as well. All right, so now we're going to move into the light independent reaction, also known as the Calvin cycle. This takes place in the stroma. Your stroma, again, is kind of like your cytoplasm for the cell, but inside of your chloroplast itself. So your light independent reaction uses ATP and NADPH from the light dependent reaction to produce high energy sugars. So now I'm going to move on to the picture after this slide, and I'm going to talk over this slide while you look at the picture itself. Ribulose biphosphate and carbon dioxide will bind together in a process called carbon fixation. That's going to be here. This first one, Rubisco, is your ribulose biphosphate carboxylase. So what I just went over, ribulose biphosphate and carbon dioxide, that's just gonna, excuse me, that's not Rubisco. Rubisco is what we get at the end. We're going to start here at this 1C. Rubisco is at the end of 5C. We're going to start with 1C and move this way and go in a circle. So carbon fixations happens first. When these two compounds combine, it becomes extremely unstable. The compound then splits to form a 3-carbon compound called phosphoglycerate. So here we have our 6 carbons. These two ribulose biphosphate and carbon dioxide have come together here, but it is extremely unstable. So then we're going to break apart and then come down here to phosphoglycerate. Energy from molecules of ATP and molecules of NADPH are used to convert phosphoglycerate to glycerol phosphate, or G3P. Oh, that's a long word. Glyceraldehyde 3P. Oh, that's a lot easier to say. Okay, so after we come here from our phosphoglycerate, we still have 3 carbons. Moving down to a reduction, what's the word? We're, process? No. What is this? Reaction, that's the word. We're going to have a reduction reaction. We are reducing the electrons in it, making it more positive. And then we're going to come here to glyceraldehyde 3P, or G3P. And this is where we begin to actually make the glucose molecule. And from glucose, we can get starches, sucrose, sucralose, cellulose, and more. G3P can be converted into different carbohydrates. Again, all three of these, starches, sucrose, and cellulose, are different types of carbohydrates. 5 molecules of G3P plus energy from ATP will generate Rubisco, and the Calvin cycle continues. So from here, from the G3P, we get 5 molecules here. We add 5, get this 1 carbon from CO2, and now we have the completed Rubisco. So we're not starting with Rubisco, but we are ending with Rubisco. Ribulose biphosphate adds in that 1 carbon dioxide, carbon fixation, then we start this whole process over again. So the Calvin cycle uses 6 molecules of carbon dioxide to produce 1 single glucose molecule. Energy from this conversion comes from ATP and high energy electrons from NADPH. So the products of photosynthesis. So we need sunlight and we need chlorophyll in order to do photosynthesis. Carbon dioxide and water are the required chemicals. Oxygen and glucose are the products. The products of photosynthesis are the reactants of cellular respiration. So, what I want you guys to do now, write down the chemical formula for photosynthesis. How are the products of photosynthesis related to cellular respiration? Now moving into cellular respiration, we have our formula. C6H12O6 plus 6O2 combined with heat gives us the products of C6O2, 6H2O, and ATP. Your reactants, glucose and oxygen, are going to give you the products of carbon dioxide, water, and energy. Here we're labeling our energy as ATP. This video here is the crash course guy on Schoology. If you would please download this PowerPoint, that way you can watch the video. He just gives you a little bit extra words. He talks a little bit more about cellular respiration, just so you guys can hear it from somewhere else, getting the same information. I don't want to bombard you having a 40-minute long video, because this video is about 12 minutes long. So I'm not going to play it for you here today, but you guys can watch the video, and I urge you to watch this video as well. I know y'all don't always find him funny, but he is actually kind of funny to me. All right, so where does cellular respiration occur? The cristae, the folds within the mitochondria, they increase surface area for electron transport train. The matrix, the space with enzymes needed for the Krebs cycle. So the matrix is the inside of your mitochondria. The cristae is the folds themselves. All right, so the process of cellular respiration. This is a lot to look at here. This was one of those pictures we saw earlier in the last video, where there was glucose showing you glycolysis and the different stages, how much ATP was produced from those. So glucose comes into your mitochondria. Electrons are carried by NADH, all coming in here to the mitochondria. And then so glucose is directly inputted into the Krebs cycle. From there, electrons are carried by NADH and FADH. And then here in the electron transport chain, this is where they are oxidized through a process called oxidative phosphorylation. we'll get into that later on. But that's how we make ATP, oxidative phosphorylation. In the phosphate heads themselves, there are oxygen molecules. It's not just a phosphate. They're oxygen atoms. It's not just a phosphate atom in the phosphate groups. It's oxygens and phosphates and hydrogens as well. No, I just lost my train of thought. Sorry, guys. Okay, cellular respiration. We start off with glucose. Not all of the electrons from glucose are going to go directly into the Krebs cycle. Some of them get taken directly to the electron transport chain. From glucose, we have a process called glycolysis. This is how it's broken down into the Krebs cycle. Krebs cycle also gives you some ATP. What ATP isn't taken off, we get some energy from the electrons. They're also carried to the electron transport chain. At the end of the electron transport chain, this is where we get the majority of our ATP from as far as cellular respiration. All right, so anaerobic glycolysis. This is a part that does not require oxygen. It happens in the cytoplasm. Again, does not need oxygen. Glyco is the sugar. Lysis means breaking down. So glyco is glucose that describes the type of sugar. Lysis is telling you what is happening to it. It is breaking it down. So glycolysis literally means the breaking of glucose. The net products of glycolysis, we have 2 pyruvates, 2 NADH molecules, and then 2 ATP molecules. Aerobic respiration is going to be the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle. I know there's a lot of words here, but we're going to get through them. So, Krebs cycle is how food gets broken down chemically in a series of repeating steps until it releases ATP and high energy electrons to fuel cellular processes, or processes, however you pronounce that word. This all happens in the matrix of the mitochondria. Again, this is aerobic process, so it requires oxygen. The net products, or what you get out of the Krebs cycle, are 6 carbon dioxide molecules, 2 ATPs, 8 NADHs, and 2 FADHs. So if you notice, the Krebs cycle and the glycolysis both give you 2 ATP. Krebs cycle gives you a little bit more NADH, the electron carriers, but it's still not a whole lot. But you do get a little bit more here with the Krebs cycle. Next part of the aerobic process is going to be the electron transport chain. This happens in the cristae of your mitochondria. This is the final stage, and it produces between 32 and 34 ATP. So this is where you get 90, 85% of your ATP from in your body. This specific portion of cellular respiration. So again, glycolysis only gave you 2. Krebs cycle only gave you 2. So you get between 36 and 38 ATP. 32 to 34 of it is coming from the electron transport chain. So this is, it requires oxygen as the final electron acceptor to make water. And then the active transport across the membrane creates a concentration gradient, which allows for chemiosmosis. This is passive transport of the hydrogen ions to occur. So what the ETC, or the electron transport chain, is doing is creating a concentration gradient. So it's using active transport to get negative ions from one side to the other. That way you can have more negative ions on the inside. That way the hydrogen positive ions passively transport inside of the matrix. So here, this is actually showing you, this is photosynthesis and cellular respiration. The sun, light energy is needed for photosynthesis. You have your two reactants. We get glucose and oxygen. Cellular respiration, chemical energy is stored in ATP. We need glucose and oxygen. We produce carbon dioxide and water. Here for specifically cellular respiration, start off with glucose, go through glycolysis, we get pyruvate, ATP, and NADH. Acetyl-CoA is just one other portion that we get from glycolysis. You don't need to know about that just yet. The more you get into biology and plant studies, you'll learn more about acetyl-CoA. Then from the Krebs cycle, we have 2 ATP, 6 NADH, and then also 2 FADH. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to conclude our lesson on ATP and cellular energy. If you have any questions, message me, email me, and I will be more than happy to help you answer them. Y'all have a good day.